Hi, welcome to this week's episode of the Wellbeing Show. We're joined by Michael, who lives just outside of New York, and New York happens to be one of my favorite places on the world. So I'm very jealous that he gets to live there. And he's got a great t-shirt behind him saying "Choose Joy," which is a really always a good choice as far as I'm concerned. Did you make those yourself, Michael?
Yeah, actually, these are my design. But I got some inspiration
Did you?
from the Choose Life design T-shirts from Wham back
Yeah.
in the early 80s.
Yeah.
The Wake Me Up Before You Go Go music video. So I
Yeah.
used
Yeah. Yeah.
Choose Life, that design, to create Choose Joy. So there's one in the background. I'm also wearing one. I'm
Great.
wearing the black version, but I do think it's a choice. You know, we get
Oh,
to wake up every day and decide where we point our eyeballs, and we we can acknowledge the craziness of life today,
yeah.
and
Well,
we can also find moments of joy.
being a New Yorker, there's going to be a lot of cultural overlap with us Londoners. Uh,
Yes,
so it's sort of the same place, really. They're just
it is. Yes,
separated
yes.
by a bit of salt water, but it's literally. I remember first time I was in Central Park, and this 90-year-old, she must have been 90-year-old jogger, 80 or 90, did it in classic New York style. I happened to be on her in her way while she was jogging, so she sort of almost knocked me to the ground. So I thought, yeah, I'm in New York, aren't I? Some
Yes,
octogenarian is kicking the shit out of me because they want to go for a
yes.
run. There you go. Welcome
I,
to.
I, I love that. Last year, I went into Central Park, and we'll probably get into the reason behind this when we have our conversation.
Yeah.
But I asked complete strangers, I'd walk up to them in the park and I'd be like, "Hey, what are you grateful for?" And a couple of them were like, basically gave me the a good old fashioned New York wave. They
Yeah.
said, get out of here." For those that don't know that wave, it's a single digit of your hand
Yeah,
in the
that's
middle.
right.
And other people were quite pleasant.
Great.
But I definitely got a little bit of New York
I
when I
remember
did
being
that.
assaulted by a squirrel in New York
Oh yes,
outside the UN. It's rather stupidly as a tourist, I turned up with food, which is deadly to be anywhere near
yes.
squirrels in New York with food. Really bad idea.
Squirrels and pigeons
Yeah,
will
quite.
be the death of you, Noel.
They certainly will. They come armed, mate. They come
they
armed.
have they have vicious teeth, like it's a Monty Python
Yeah,
scene,
it
like
really is.
beware of the squirrels and the pigeons of New York
Yeah.
City.
Did you grow up in New York, that area of the world?
Well, I actually grew up in upstate New York
Okay.
in a city called Rochester, which is the home of Eastman Kodak. So a picture is worth 1,000 words. So I grew up there, and then I ended up in Washington, D.C. for a bit.
Uh-huh.
That's where I met my wife, and then we came up here to New Jersey. But yeah, living so close to New York City is really amazing. New York, there's a lot to it.
Yeah.
It's the city that never sleeps, as they say. But
Yeah.
I, I do have faith in humankind when
Yeah.
I look at New York, because you can put a whole bunch of people on this little island,
Yeah.
8 million people on about 10 miles of island from all over the world with all different worldviews and religions and perspectives.
Yeah.
And for the most part, it's not perfect by any means, but for the most part, they live with some level of civility and order. And
Yeah.
they find a way to cohabitat the island of Manhattan and the other boroughs.
Yeah.
So I do have faith that we can find a way to come
Yeah.
together. And New York is a little bit of that optimistic glow for me.
It's nice. I mean, I was wondering about that because one of the things that strikes me about New York, one of the things I love about London, is this sort of melting pot of people.
Yes.
And I love that. I mean, I'm not originally from London. I'm from another city, which is also a melting pot, but I enjoy it, that diversity, the difference, just on even simple things like the range of food I get to choose from is just awesome to me. I
Yeah,
like
yeah,
where in the world would I like to eat today is
yes,
a
yeah,
genuine question that I have, and
yeah.
I love it.
And New York really, there are a couple other major cities in the U.S. that offer that, but nothing like New York. If you go into other parts of the U.S., you have basically the same choices, and they're all what we'd call fast food
Yeah.
options,
Yeah.
or fast casual. It's everything is like the Gap, everything's like Starbucks.
Yeah.
And New York, New York, you have the big Starbucks of the world, but you also have the local coffee shop, you have a diner, you have big chain restaurants. You have it all, and you have so many wonderful choices at whatever hour you happen to be awake. And yeah, a whole bunch of different languages, different perspectives. I do think it's like, it is the great melting pot,
Yeah.
or some people have used the great mixed salad, everything's mixed into one big salad, whatever analogy works for you. But I do love being so close to New York, and we get to pop in, and then if it gets too much, we can pop out and get a little bit
Yeah.
more of the quiet
Yeah.
vibe of being in the suburbs.
What was it like in your family? You sort of are your family historic? Everybody's an immigrant at some point if you go back far enough. But what's the story of your family and being? How did they get to where they are?
So with the last name O'Brien, it was far from Ireland. We
Mhm.
came. My mom's maiden name was Ryan. So I've done those DNA
Yeah.
swabs, and I
Yeah.
think 80% of my DNA comes from parts of the UK, in Ireland, and so I own my Irish heritage, right?
Right.
So they came and landed in my on my dad's side, a town called Palmyra, which was the birthplace of Mormonism,
Yeah.
and so he grew up in Palmyra, which is right on the Erie Canal that goes through New York State.
Mhm.
And my dad's been there ever since. My mom moved from the Massachusetts area, and they got set up on a date. They were married 54 years. My mom passed away 4 years ago during the pandemic, and our dad is
Mm.
still with us. I have a
Mm.
sister,
Mm.
and for the large part, it was basically a pretty typical middle class upbringing.
Right.
Although I had this desire to get out and explore. So we weren't great travelers as
Mm.
a family, but I had a desire to break free from Rochester.
Yeah.
And so that's what prompted me to motivate myself to go to school somewhere else. So you would call it uni, we call it college or
Yeah.
university here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I went down to school in Virginia, and then to DC I went. So I was really the kid in the family who left the nest, if you will.
Yeah. What was it like going to Virginia? Because I imagine, quite a different culture. It's sort of like, it's it it's part of the south of the US, right?
Yeah, it's part of the South. So you had that blend. Obviously, current day, there's a little bit more mixing that's gone on. And so you definitely I had friends that were, from the South, and sort of had Southern perspectives. The
Hmm.
school that I went to also pulled a lot of students, a lot of kids from the Northern Virginia, DC, Maryland area.
Hmm.
So they had a little bit more of a Northern perspective. So it
Yeah.
was quite interesting. And
Yeah.
so from a history perspective, there I was in a Civil War state. New York
Yeah.
was a
Yeah.
Revolutionary War state, at least
Yeah.
some parts of it. So I went from the Revolutionary War state to a Civil War state, and that was really it was fascinating.
Yeah.
And
I've been
then
to America a lot. For those people who haven't, because I've had business there and stuff like that, but I once chose to drive across the US. So
oh
I
yeah,
landed in Florida, hired a car, and drove across to Los Angeles.
oh nice.
It was one of the most extraordinary experiences I ever had. The US is vast. I don't think people really understand how big it is.
No,
Yeah.
I've I really didn't understand it completely myself
Right.
until I rode my bike across the country in
Get out of
2022.
here. I plan to do that. I'd love to do that.
Yeah, so
So,
so I've always had this goal as a kid,
mhm.
and my wife always had a goal of renting an RV, one of
Yeah,
those big RVs, and driving across the country. So we were able to combine two lifelong goals. And
brilliant.
we started in Oregon and we
Yeah,
ended up in DC. It was sort of fitting because we met there. And you know, you I spent most of my life on the East Coast. I've had the good fortune to travel to most of the continents in a whole bunch of different countries. I think like 23 or 24 different countries.
hmm,
But I hadn't been to all of the states in
yeah,
the US. And
yeah, yeah,
going out to the West was so impressive, like
mm,
how big some of these states are. And
yeah,
also just the natural beauty of America. You
yeah,
know, like when you get out in the openness. And so I would be out in parts of, say, Wyoming or Colorado,
yeah.
and it would just be me on my bike,
That's
right? It
right.
would be
Yeah,
like no people, no houses,
yeah,
no cars. It's just me and the great big sky and my bike. So many different experiences
yeah.
and moments of
I remember
awe. Yeah.
whole days on the in the car when I was driving through America, whole days of not seeing anything at all.
Yes. Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and it's just hitting that 55 or 70 miles an hour, whatever the limit was, putting it on cruise control and just going and going and going and not stopping. And you'd see a service station or petrol station, gas station, as you'd call
Yes.
it, and you'd gas up, but that was it. That's the only life you saw. I always wondered where those people lived in those gas stations.
Well, yeah.
They
You
pop
don't
up
really
somewhere from
they
underground.
just pop up magically. It's really
Yeah,
crazy. But you had to imagine you drove through Texas, and that is a long drive. That probably took you a good 3 or 4 days just to
yeah.
drive through Texas.
Yeah, I mean it's crazy, crazy stuff. Amazing country, full of lots of contradictions, but certainly
Sure.
I think East Coast New York would be very familiar to a lot of Europeans in terms of the
Sure.
lifestyle and culture. And in terms of the
Yes.
international perspective on things. Whereas a
Yes.
lot of the US is quite insular. It's a country where few people have passports, for example.
Absolutely. We don't, as a nation, as a citizenship, we don't really travel. Many people don't have
Yeah,
a passport. They hardly leave where they grew up. And you, what I appreciated, because, coming from the East Coast and just living in DC, which is another metropolitan city, obviously you have an international community coming to
yeah.
Washington, DC, and you have a lot of people from the States coming into DC.
So
But
carry on.
but being out there in the middle of nowhere, I had an appreciation of like, well, if this is your perspective of the world,
Yeah,
like you don't really see a lot and you just see what might be on, say, the television or the internet.
yeah,
That's going to frame things for you. And depending on what you can consume, you can believe a wide variety of different things or different theories. And so I came away with the trip of falling in love with America and the promise
yeah.
that it is, uh, her beauty, but also a little bit of a deeper appreciation of like how perspectives are shaped, and
Yeah,
especially in a country that is as large as the U.S.
yeah, absolutely. And people sort of having a very insular view of things because that's their life.
Yes. Yeah.
And very rural, sort of, on farms that were huge, but still just farms with a few people. So, um, you tell us you went to university. What did you study at university? What was it? Sort of
So I started out
at school. Sorry,
studying
you call it school, don't you? My apologies.
UOA school, college, yeah, college, university. So I started off studying medicine, actually,
Mhm,
ophthalmology, so to be an eye doctor. But I switched to uh, economics and marketing. So I
mhm.
actually have a preference of economics. I loved so it's like economic theory and stuff like that. So I when I went into college, like my parents never went to
Mhm.
uni. They both had more of, I would say, blue collar jobs. My dad was a salesperson
Yeah.
for a liquor manufacturer, and my mom was a nurse.
Yeah.
So she worked the night shift. So they're like, well, we never went to college, so our kids don't need to go there. And so they never really saved any money to go because
Mm.
here in the States, college, it was expensive back then, but it's obscene now.
Yeah.
And so I had to fund my own way. And so I took out a lot of student loans. So I felt that I had to be practical, right? I had a desire to study philosophy and sociology because I love how people tick. I love
Yeah.
like what makes them tick. And
Yeah.
so that field was a great interest. So it's just been a lifelong interest for me, but not a study and not a focus or a
Yeah.
concentration when I went to college, because I wanted to get out of college and be able to pay back my student loans.
Yeah. No, fair enough.
And so I followed in my dad's footsteps from a business career, but still had all this great interest. I just, going back to New York, I love going into New York and just watching people walk by. I just
Yeah.
love trying to figure like what's their story. I do that too when I go to the airport. I love, I don't mind waiting for flights at the airport because it gives me more time to just
Yeah.
sort of witness people and say, I wonder where they're going. I wonder what their
That's, I mean,
story is.
I think that's a very Irish cultural thing, to be honest. The love of stories and love of people.
Yeah.
Just making up stories about things.
Yeah,
It's an
I
Irish
do that
saying,
too.
isn't there? Never let the truth get in the way of a good story.
Yeah,
You know what I
absolutely.
mean? And it's
Yeah.
like I feel that very much. It's sort of like
Yeah.
embellishment and stories. Outright lying is fine as long as it's
Yeah. Yeah.
entertaining. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
hey, as long as it makes a good story over a good
That's
pint,
exactly
we're
right.
good. We're
That's
like,
absolutely.
and a few laughs, like that's a night well spent.
But also, it's very much Irish to be a lover of ideas and literature. Do you think that's
Yeah.
where it came from in you? Was it part of your family, or was it just you were sort of odd? You were the odd one out.
I was a little bit of the odd one out. Like my parents weren't deep into literature. They
Okay.
weren't necessarily readers, but a good pun, a good story. My dad, a very social creature, right? So he wasn't necessarily, or current day, a deep thinker, but quick with a good pun,
Yeah.
quick with what we'd say a dad joke. People think he's adorable, like
Yeah.
all that. He'll show up in service and be that person you can count on. So I think from both of my parents, what they taught us was the need to show up and be in service
Yeah.
and have a
Yeah.
good
Yeah. Yeah.
laugh
Yeah.
and all that. But like deep intellectual thinking, we didn't really have a lot of that. They didn't
Cool.
role model that. But I was curious. I had some other family member that were more studious and also more into literature. So I sort of pulled a little bit of that thread. I found that to be interesting. I also found it to be a gateway to leave Rochester and just explore more. And
Yeah.
so when I got married, when my wife and I got married, I got my first passport. Um, but I married someone who needed to get more pages put into her passport. So
Right.
you can see like I was attracted to the fact that she was a world traveler
Okay.
and
Yeah.
so the adventure. So I obviously love her to death. We've been married 31 years, but I wanted that sense of adventure.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
from an
I can see it.
attraction perspective and
Yeah.
the stories that come along with a great travel.
Yeah. That's amazing. I mean, it's really interesting as well that even though it wasn't your parents' cup of tea, they didn't stop you, did they? They were
No,
okay with you being you and you doing you. And so off you went. And did you become this economic giant? Did you leave university with this economics degree and then rule the corporate world in some way?
well, I did okay in the corporate rule. I perhaps didn't rule it, but I had a good career. I actually went and married up my dad's business mindset with my mom's care and
Yeah.
ended up in healthcare and very specifically within the pharmaceutical industry
Okay.
and in diseases that impacted our family. So
Oh, wow.
but
Right.
specifically Alzheimer's disease and metastatic breast cancer, to name two disease states. And
Yeah.
so for me, it was a little bit of a calling to see how I could contribute to hopefully easing the suffering that patients, along with their families, go through when
Yeah.
those diseases come calling
Yeah.
to households. So, and that was a good part of my career. And I was, you know, I was able to move up to the executive suite and have a really great career. Along the way, I had like a little bit of a detour known as my accident, which we might get into.
That
But
we will get into.
I had I had a great career, and I feel like I created a big enough ripple effect. In fact, last night I had dinner with two of my direct reports who have gone on to similar positions that I once had. And so they're making a difference in different companies. And it brought me so much joy to see their success. There's a
Yeah.
term called mudita, M-U-D-I-T-A, which means appreciative joy. And so knowing that I've had at least some impact in other people's careers and to see them making a difference in other people's lives, and
Yeah.
that's what brings me along.
Which is great because there can be quite, at times, quite a friction in America around healthcare,
Oh,
like in the same with
yes.
university fees and all that sort of stuff. I mean, you are unusually for an advanced country, a country that doesn't fund healthcare, which the rest of us still find strange.
We also find it a bit strange,
I'm sure.
like so like we yeah,
I'm
the
just being
healthcare
polite
system.
about it. It's sort of
Yeah,
like,
like it's bananas, Noel.
yeah,
I actually current as we sit down here to record, my dad happens to be dealing with a little bit of a health thing
yeah,
uh that you would that naturally comes when you are close to 89 years
yeah,
old, right?
right,
And so
exactly,
and
exactly.
in talking to his providers, the healthcare professionals, no one seems to be happy except the insurance companies here in the
Quite,
States that are making all the money. Everyone feels under resourced or not being served enough. And we really don't do a lot in terms of preventative care. We're more of a
yeah,
acute, put a band-aid on it, fix the
yeah.
acute problem, and not really thinking about
You
the
do
long
seem to,
term.
you do seem to
Yeah.
find the most expensive way of treating things.
We do. Oh,
Like,
and especially at, on a serious note, like at the last few months of life or the last few years of life, we spend money like drunken sailors on
yeah,
healthcare. And the unfortunate thing, I'm not sure about for you all, but in less than 10 years, we'll have more people over 65 in this country than under 18, which has never happened. I think a lot of Western nations also have this graying of their country. And we're we talk about a lot here in the US. We're not talking about this. And we have no plan to
yeah, I know.
care for our seniors. And it's going to
It's
be
very similar in
yeah,
most advanced countries.
yeah,
And it fits in with the whole migration conversation and all that sort of stuff.
yes,
So there's a broader economic conversation which I'd love to get into, but
yeah,
I do want to pivot back
sure.
to you. And you also became a competitive cyclist as well as sort of working this incredibly competitive corporate environment. I'm in healthcare, so I understand just how competitive US healthcare is. And for people who don't know, it's more than dog eat dog. I mean,
It's
it's like
vicious. It's really vicious. It's
it's
like
really
you're supposed to be like this industry that's compassionate and
no,
caring
no, not at
and
all.
loving
It's
and
like
nurturing
really,
and
yeah,
and it's like don't turn your back, no, like
that's right.
because they'll stab you. Like it's just like
They'll
how
stab you
did
if
we
you're
get
lucky. I mean, I
yeah, yeah.
generally
It's
flay you alive and enjoy it,
yes, it is
film it and
it's
share
like
it with
it's
them.
the definition of cutthroat, right? So
Absolutely.
but no, I fell in love with cycling
I'm
watching the
going to put my
Tour de
hand up and let
France.
you know I'm a keen cyclist. I have been since I was a child.
Awesome.
So I don't
Awesome.
do racing, but I do touring and
Yeah, I
travel
love
on a
it.
bicycle. And in London, I'm off to see a friend after this, and I'm going to get one of those. They call them Lime bikes here. They're these,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. We have them here.
yeah, the higher electric bikes, and
Yeah,
it's just great. I can't think
I
of anything
know.
better. So
No, like more people on bikes is, I think, just better for the
But you can do it
planet.
in New York. You can't do it anywhere else in America. I think you'd be insane to sort of imagine cycling outside a major metropolitan center in America. But you became a competitive cyclist, is that right?
Yes.
What does that
Yeah, I
mean? What did
can.
you do?
So I would do races mainly in the US, sometimes in Canada,
Yeah,
but generally on the weekends. It became something that in grammar school, and what we call high school, I I got into. I saw the Tour de France on the television,
yeah,
and I like again going back to this theme of travel. I was like,
yeah.
wow, it seemed romantic and the stories, and there was a little bit of back then cycling back then in the 70s and 80s was a little bit more blue collar. Like there were guys leaving small towns in France and in Belgium and
But in
in the
America, there's Lance
Netherlands.
Armstrong, right? Sort of
Yeah,
before his fall, as it were, but an
yeah,
amazing
yes, yes.
story, right? You know,
Yeah, yeah, and so I just fell in love with the sport. I was like, oh,
right.
well, you could travel and venture, and so I just started riding my bike and racing my bike. And I still remember the first day I came off of training wheels when I was a young kid. I thought I was
Yeah,
like I was able to go places, right?
I
I
know,
was
it's
able to
amazing. Yeah,
explore,
yeah,
and I could go to my friend's house, which probably like just three houses down from our house, but on my own, right? So I thought I had all this freedom. And
yeah.
so I just stayed in love with the bike really through my teen years, even after I got my driver's license. And then I found this thing called bike racing. And I did it for a long time until like, my early 20s when I knew I was never going to go professional and go off to Europe and race in Paris and all that. And so I had a little bit of a love affair with running at the time, but cycling it always was part of like who I was. I love the 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 difficulty in it, a little bit of the I guess self-inflicted suffering of it.
I mean, it's a
And
challenge. Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
a challenge, it's a sport where you do it in the out in nature, out in the environment. There's
Yeah,
headwinds, crosswinds and tailwinds and uphills and downhills. I feel it's a pretty apt metaphor for life.
yeah,
And when you're sometimes it's really beautiful to do it on your own, and then but you can also have a beautiful sense of community.
yeah.
And when you ride together, you can go further and you can go faster. So I, to me, it's almost like a meditative movement on in some cases,
Yeah, no, I get
especially when
it.
I was
I get it.
riding across the country. But there's also that competitive itch to see like how fast you can go and how much you can push yourself. So yeah, I've been in
But
love with the
again,
bike
that's
ever
quite a
since.
theme in your life, isn't it? This sort of
Yes.
wanting to move on and push things and excel, make decisions, not necessarily in an antisocial way, but, challenging yourself against peers, becoming
Yeah.
successful in the business field and cycling. And
Yeah.
so, yeah,
And cycling also taught me later about the need to be present on like the only thing you can really control is like this pedal stroke right now.
yeah, yeah,
Right. So in my early days of cycling, it was a little bit more of that competition and winning, and also just in my career, advancing your career. And I had that push, right? That,
sure.
you not in the current moment, just like pushing to the next one and pushing to the next one. And I'll be happier when I get to the next moment. You get that job or you get that victory.
Yeah,
What cycling taught me later in life is just you can only control this pedal stroke and this one and the next one and staying with that. And so especially during the ride across the country, if you get too caught up on getting to your final destination,
yeah.
you'll
And
drive
that's what I'm
yourself
thinking is
bonkers.
long distance stuff. You have
Yes.
to be in the moment, don't you? If you start to try and imagine, same with mountaineering, if you're
Yes.
constantly obsessing about getting to the top, you're never going to make it. It's just not going to happen. It has to be the next hour, and that's it. And then you take your rest, and then it's the next hour and stuff like that.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And what I found over the last 10 years is a love of gravel
Oh, right.
cycling, gravel,
Yeah,
and even gravel bike racing. And there's something about that because you're now away from the asphalt,
sure.
you're away from the cars, and there's this beautiful soundscape that happens on a gravel road.
Yeah,
You just, the tires, it's the dirt. It actually brings me back to when I was a kid riding my bike
yeah.
and playing around with like little BMX bikes and getting dirty and the taste of the dirt on your mouth and
I
the
tell you
sounds
what,
are different. Yeah.
when next time you make it to the UK, check out a thing called NCN, National Cycle Network.
Okay.
These long distance routes throughout the UK, which
Oh,
take
nice.
you from asphalt to gravel to
Oh,
absolute dirt track. Beautiful routes. Like the NCN1 is the whole of the east coast of Britain, right to
nice.
the top of Scotland. And that links into a thing called the North Sea Cycle Route, which I'm going to be doing part of again. So
Oh,
these,
very cool.
it's really beautiful. So check it out. I'll send you a link after the show to them. Um, Now, an event happened while you were cycling, which is part of what we're here to talk about. Can you tell us what that was and what happened?
Yeah, so it was actually a mixture of like my career and cycling because I
Right.
was out in New Mexico,
Hmm.
north of Albuquerque,
Hmm.
for a company offsite meeting, and I brought my bike out.
Yeah.
So I traveled with my bike, and my colleagues traveled with their golf clubs.
Yeah.
So, and I was like, well, I'm going to go out and I'm going to like ride my bike in New Mexico. It was one state that I hadn't ridden my bike yet in, and so one morning I was doing a 2 mile loop. It's going to
Yeah.
do 10 laps, no, and on the fourth lap, a Ford Explorer, an SUV here in this country,
Yeah.
was going about 40 miles an hour. So that's what, about 70 kilometers an hour, I think.
40 miles. We do miles an hour in the UK. It's fine. Just
Okay, so yeah, 40 miles an hour uh, crossed over the center line of the road and hit me head on. And
ouch.
I remember everything about the impact. But I got medevac to the trauma center. I just remember though, like waiting for the helicopter to arrive. I'm like, this cannot be happening.
Yeah.
I made some bargains with anyone who would listen that I would stop sort of chasing my happiness, which was sort of the pursuit, right, that I had
Yeah. Yeah.
in the early part of my career. The doctors later told my wife they have no idea how I survived
Hmm.
because I broke a whole bunch of everything. And also, when my left femur shattered, it lacerated the femoral artery of my left leg. So
Bloody hell. That's really
I
serious.
lost I lost a ton of blood.
Yeah.
So I'm very fortunate that I still have that leg fully intact.
Right.
Also very fortunate I didn't lose my leg because of just the trauma.
Yeah.
But that was that that was like a moment that was like a huge inflection point, as you can clearly imagine.
Yeah.
After they operated on me, the first surgery took about 13 hours. I went into the ICU. I came out of the ICU and they told me about the nature of the accident. The driver should not have been driving. He had a revoked driver's license. I
Ah.
was, I was, I was so mad.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was revengeful.
Oh,
I thought life was unfair. I also like when the hospital got quiet, that's when I really got the depression, the sadness really came to the surface because I thought, well, I know how I was doing life in that whole chasing of happiness, not
hmm.
really knowing how to like release stress. So I would just carry it around with me.
Hmm.
Bottle it up. And so I knew like, okay, that wasn't ideal, but like, I had a good career going and we had two young daughters who were
Yeah.
3.5 years old and 7 months old at the time. If I can't be that guy, like who am I going to become?
Yeah.
And I really had a lot of questions about identity. And, luckily, I was then moved from New Mexico to New Jersey.
Hmm.
I went to one hospital for more surgeries and then finally a third hospital. So I spent in total initially almost 4 months in the hospital.
Yeah.
And through one interaction, one mentor shared with me, he was like, you know what, everything's neutral, Michael, until you label it. And you get to label this event in any way you want. You can see
Okay.
yourself, you can
Yeah.
see yourself as a victim in all this, and no one would blame you if you came away with that conclusion. He goes, however, you can see this situation much differently. Like you get to choose your labels, right? And
Yeah.
so we're so quick to label things, and I eventually
I
labeled the
think it's
day.
forgivable
Yeah,
to label that as a
yeah,
really shitty experience. So
yeah, yeah. Well, like
I
totally, it
don't
was
think
a
that's all right,
yeah,
mate.
yeah. I was like,
Understandable.
yeah. So I sort of
The
have like
driver was distracted, I believe, as well.
we think, that he's either distracted or, I think part of the truth was he was coming actually to work at the hotel that we were at, and he was working on for our group, setting up our group meeting. And one theory is that he was late to work and he was cutting the apex of the
Yeah.
turn,
Yeah.
and he was not anticipating a cyclist to be on the road, even though it was fine for me to be on the road. He was just not paying attention. He might be flipping the radio station. Back in 2001, it was the time before like really being on cell phones.
Yeah.
But certainly a distracted driver going way too fast for the road conditions. And then like, as things happen. And so now I'm in this state where I'm laid up. I have a long road ahead of me.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
uncertain. Um, through one phase of my recovery, I found the power of gratitude. I found the power of mindfulness
Hmm.
as a way to like slow things down, so I could get my bearings, get grounded, so I can like approach my rehab with some type of intentions, because everything was
Yeah. Yeah.
coming at me so quickly. I needed to find a way to slow things down. And I sort of pulled a page from all my days playing sports when I was younger.
Yeah.
Anytime there was a real critical moment in a match or a game, the coach would always, either call a timeout just to give us a break, but they would always say like, just try to breathe. And so I was trying to find some space just to make sense of everything that
Yeah.
was happening. And so that was
Sure.
those two practices, the practice of mindful meditation and the practice of gratitude, really helped, ground my recovery. And I feel very fortunate that my body responded
Mhm.
in a great way for me to like now continue to ride my bike. Many people go through like situations like mine, and their body just doesn't respond in the same way mine did, right? So
So
there are
tell
definitely
me,
things that I did,
tell
but
me on a
I also,
practical level, because I guess most people think they know what mindfulness is. I'll ask you what you think it is in a moment, but
yeah.
just the gratitude thing, it sounds very hug a tree. I mean, what,
Yeah,
I mean, and it sort of is, right? It
it
is.
is. It is.
It sort
Yeah.
of
But
is.
yeah.
But how did you practically get involved in being grateful? What did you do? Was it just some thoughts, or did you do any exercises? How did you learn about it? How did you come across it?
So I came across it through someone that reached out to me because I was getting a lot of phone calls and, talking to one friend who is sort of in the hug the tree category of friends, like a little bit of the woo woo friend,
Right.
like not
We're all
not a
gonna have
serious,
somebody who hugs a tree in our life.
yeah, like not a serious business person
Yeah,
friend, but
no,
like because I knew no serious business person back then was practicing gratitude,
but
God
they
forbid.
will be now, I'm telling you.
Hopefully, yes. So and she brought up the whole practice of gratitude, and I was like, well, what do you do? And so she goes,
Yes,
well,
go on. Yeah. That
this is
would be
what I
my
do.
initial. What?
Yeah, yeah. And so
Hang on.
from
Gratitude for what? I've got no legs on my
yeah,
body,
well, baby,
busted up. Where am I? What are you talking
because I
about?
was in a little bit of like, I've lost everything. Like
Yeah.
I was really focusing on everything that I couldn't do anymore or didn't have. And she's like, well, gratitude helps you see what you still have and what you still can do. So I sort of took what she shared with me, and then I had an evening practice because the demons in my head, the like crazy narrative,
Yeah.
got really loud when it was time to go to sleep.
Yeah.
So before I went to bed, I just tried to list off, and sometimes I would journal about it, but I have horrible penmanship. So
Yeah.
I would write something and I would be like, what did I just write? I have no idea. Like,
Nobody can read my writing.
like no one can read my writing.
Least of all me.
Like I had
Yeah.
no worries about people reading my diary
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
no one, because I
You
couldn't
don't make
even read
sense
my
of it.
diary.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
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 But I would spend about 5 to 10 minutes before I really drifted off thinking, okay, what were some things that were really good about today?
Yeah.
And that helped balance out like all the things that were really a challenge and a pain in the ass to do.
Yeah.
And
But
so
there's
that
lots.
became the start of the practice.
There's a lot of neuroscience to back all this stuff up. And the
Totally.
best explanation I've heard of it is a metaphor. Imagine yourself, your mind as a garden. Imagine you as the gardener, and you've got a decision to make. Which plants do I put in the sunlight? Which plants do
Yes.
I water? Now, they could be the plants of depression and anxiety, or they could be, for example, the plants of gratitude and
Yeah.
um, positivity, and there's a literal truth to that. Whatever we think about, we build stronger neural networks around. So there's a lot of
Yes.
evidence base, but it's sort of it does feel a bit woo woo when you first come across it, though. It's
Oh,
quite
totally. Yeah. Like even to this day, like, and
right.
we have come far, but when I talk to my, you know, leaders that I work with and coach, they're like, what?
What?
Like I'm
What?
not gonna. I go, yeah, just what? Maybe start the meeting with like you guys share like what's working. Like you don't even have to call it gratitude. They're like, no, 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 we have to get down to business.
Yeah.
Like, um, but there is a lot of great research that supports the practice, and I've been doing it now. That practice at night for since 2001. And what I've been able to do then, even when I'm having a tough moment, like during the course of the day, I can catalog that away. I can see other things that I'm grateful
Yeah.
for. So it becomes a little bit more of a way of living than say a thing to do right before bedtime.
Yeah.
And
I get
so,
that.
and and even as I mentioned earlier, my dad going through a little bit of his health challenge, I've tried to bring it to him like, hey, Dad, what's something that's good that's already happened today?
Yeah.
He's like, let me think, like, and sure enough, he's able to think of a couple different things. I'm like, okay, so that's something just as a counterbalance to the analogy that you used, like to plant in the garden.
Yeah.
And we can still acknowledge that the current situation is really tough.
Hmm.
It's less than ideal. It's muddy. It's all of that. And at the same time, there are things that are really positive in one's life. And we can
But also,
also
I don't know
spend
if
some
you
time.
got this when you're doing it. The evidence is quite clear that it reduces our blood pressure,
Yeah,
reduces the stress hormones in our body, makes
sure.
us more
Yeah.
pro-social. We
Yes.
become more creative because fear is not creative, is the opposite of
Yes.
creativity.
Yeah.
So we actually do problem solve better. We come up with better solutions. We use the other side of our brain, which is the bit of the brain that sees big connections and new
Yeah.
things. So all of that stuff we know. Um, and it also that thing of gratitude as a daily thing rather than a formal practice. So to me, that looks like I'm always now noticing something that's nice.
Yeah.
I'm not even
Yeah.
cataloging it as gratitude. I'm just going, oh, that's nice. Oh, I notice wildflowers. And I no longer feel stupid about it because I'm aware. And I think partly as a bloke, I need to have this explanation. Otherwise, I feel like a dumbass, right? Um, but I'm
Yeah.
aware that if I notice a poppy in some wildflowers, I'm aware of the science behind it now. And that legitimizes it for me. And it means I'm making myself healthy.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was
Great.
driving
Yeah.
back from my dad last night and I came around the bend and it was a whole forest of trees.
Oh, great.
And I was like, I just soaked that in. I was like,
Have
Yes.
you done forest washing yet?
Yes, yeah. Well, yeah, and you have
Absolutely
you
awesome.
oh, you had one of your previous guests that talked
Yeah,
all
yeah,
about it.
he
I
does
forget
it
his
all the
name.
time. Really
Yeah.
awesome, awesome person. So tell me about mindfulness and how you came across it, what it meant, what it means now. What is mindfulness? Everybody talks about it, but what is it for you?
Yeah, so what it for me what it is, it's a moment to create some space.
Sure.
And there's definitions that it's about paying attention on purpose. There's a definition it means to remember. There's a definition it's like thinking, but not ruminating, but just sort of thinking and watching thoughts. For me, it's about creating that space. And there's a Viktor Frankl quote, which sometimes it's attributed to him. Often it's there's some controversy, but it's basically between a stimulus and your response, there's a space, and in that space, there's freedom,
Yeah.
paraphrasing it a bit.
Yeah.
And so for me, the way I started was a box breathing breathwork pattern. So
Okay.
it had nothing to do with, like, say, the Buddhist underpinnings of it. It was more about just this box breathing pattern, then that
It's
the Navy SEALs,
four in, hold for four, four out,
yeah,
hold for four, four in.
yeah, yeah.
The British
And the
Army do
Navy,
that a lot. They
yeah,
teach soldiers that one as
and
a way of
that's where I
avoiding trauma.
discovered it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
what I
Okay.
discovered. So I was like, okay, if it's good enough for the Navy SEALs and the Army
Exactly.
here,
Exactly.
I'll do it here because I'm in a bit of a traumatic situation, high
Absolutely. Yeah.
stress, and I wanted to create some space so I could be more thoughtful about the decisions that I had to make around my health,
Yeah.
because I did want to leave the hospital. I wanted to get back. I wanted to come back home to familiar sounds and feels and smells of my house. I just thought I could recover better, but I knew I had to heal more in order to do that.
Yeah.
So the box breathing pattern became like a little bit of a 5-minute practice I would do in the morning, as
Yeah.
I'd scoot out of my hospital bed into my wheelchair, and I found a quiet spot in the hospital, and I did some stretches with my arms and
Do.
some
Right.
neck stuff, and I did that 5-minute box breathing pattern, and it was like, okay, once that happened, like, things sort of settled down, right? The heart rate goes down,
It really
any
does. Yeah.
blood pressure increase comes down,
Yeah.
and now I can be a little bit more, as I
And have you
mentioned,
come across the
thoughtful.
connection with polyvagal stuff around breathing? Have
Oh
you?
yeah,
So, yeah. I mean, it's extraordinary to think that there's a nerve at the
yeah,
back of our throat that we are managing through our breath. It's
yes,
extraordinary,
it's
isn't it?
crazy. And so I started doing it, and I was like, all
Right.
right, well, this helped. And so I kept on doing it. And then I would have little, I would not just reserve it for the morning. I would just, anytime I felt stress, I would come back to the box breathing. And then
Sure.
from there, I studied further mindfulness-based stress reduction, which
Okay.
was uh, originated from John Kabat-Zinn, who
I was going to say, do
uh,
you know John? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
He's
So John,
he's the guy we all go to. We get his
yeah,
books. We learn from him. Right. Yeah.
yeah. So
I'm
that's
not
where,
worthy. All that stuff.
yeah, the full catastrophe living,
Yeah.
because it that approach spoke to my healthcare background, because
That's
he was
right.
trying to put some scientific rigor behind
Yeah.
mindfulness,
Yeah.
and there was just enough of the Buddhist underpinnings for me to understand it, because I wasn't yet ready to, like, turn to become a Buddhist. But I was like, okay, this is grounded in some science. I'm going through something highly stressful, this whole
Yeah.
recovery, this trauma. And so that practice made sense. So over the years, I just continued
Yeah.
to study further, deepen my practice. So I went beyond just, say, box breathing into other forms of meditation, into body scans that really helped me
Yeah.
get in
Yeah.
tune with my body. Loving kindness is a practice I do uh, every week at minimum, if not
Brilliant.
every other day.
Brilliant.
And but I kept my practice pretty much to myself. I left the hospital. I went back to my executive career, and I was meditating, but I didn't want to tell anyone I was meditating,
They
because
say
I
you
thought they
have to
would
put you
fire
back in
me.
hospital, right?
They would be like, he got hurt really bad. Like he's a
Like,
different
look at him, he's
person
got
now.
all weird.
Hey, he's not you know, like, yeah,
So
like what?
now I'm telling you, if you're a life coach and you work with C-suite, executive suite people, you can charge through the nose to teach them mindfulness these days.
Well, because it's luckily there are some high profile athletes that have been
Yeah.
open about their practice. There's some celebrities, and the reality is that it definitely helps sharpen focus. It can help
It's
improve attention.
improved decision
It
making, no end. It's
Yeah, it creates that
extraordinary.
space. So there's so many reasons
But
why
also,
exact.
it's also changes our DNA structure, so we're less likely to get ill because it changes the telomeres at the end of the DNA,
Yeah.
etc. So again, it's one of those things that there is a shed load of evidence for it.
Yes.
And I have to say, I still need that. I don't get drawn into the philosophies. And I was talking to the head of a yoga department about it yesterday. I've started at a new gym which has yoga in it, and I
Oh,
prefer the
good.
way they do it. I was talking to her about it. I said, I want to say thank you. I find your approach very inclusive for me because I don't want to be told about philosophy. I want to do
Yes.
the practice. That's what I want.
Yes.
I don't
Yeah.
want to feel like somebody's trying to convert me to their belief system. I've got my own. And
Yep.
as far as I'm concerned, something, if it does work, it works no matter what you believe.
Yes. Yeah. It was sort of like gravity. Like you
That's
don't
right.
have to believe in gravity to know that
And you don't
gravity
even need to
works.
know what it is. You know,
Yeah. It's just like
it's there.
it's
And
there. And so
did you get into yoga as well? I imagine you must have done, or did you avoid?
yes. No, yoga was key because I had so much work in front of me from a flexibility perspective
Exactly.
because
That's what
I
I'm
had
thinking of is that rehabilitation must have involved it.
yeah, and before yoga became like a critical part of every prehab, like the
Sure.
prehabbing before surgery, which then helps with the rehab after surgery. So since I've had so many surgeries, but really trying to open my body up because I had so much scar tissue that just laid
Sure.
down naturally.
Sure.
I've had to do things to sort of open up my body so I can have hopefully lifelong health and freedom of movement and the whole shebang. But
And
my
it's also,
approach,
I mean, I think there's
yeah,
reality to it's for me at this stage in my life. It's not, I don't want to live forever, but I want the
yes,
quality of my life that I've got to be good. And that's what
oh,
I'm
absolutely,
investing in now, is it,
yeah,
I have no intention of living to 100 if it's a boring and horrible life.
yes,
I'm just
yes.
not
Yeah.
interested.
Yeah. I am not down with the whole segment of the population who is into longevity and living to 120. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm not, I go, I don't know if we're really set up for that. Right. So, but living a long life and living a healthy life, and especially as we do get older, what yoga can be really beneficial in is around our balance, right? Because we
Yeah.
know that
Which is great. That's right. Yeah.
as we get older, our balance can go, and usually, if we do fall and we end up with an injury, that can place us in a more
Yeah.
of a skilled nursing type of environment.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yoga for me is about right at this phase of my life, making sure I have the balance, 10, 20, 30 years from now.
It's
So
like those strange metrics now, aren't they? If you can stand on one foot
yes,
with your eyes closed for a
yeah,
certain number of
yeah,
seconds, that predicts whether or not you're going to be alive at the end of a year.
yes, and or like grip strength, your ability to open a
That's right.
jar of
Yeah.
tomato
Um,
sauce,
Yeah.
like some of these wild things. So it's no longer, the metrics we cared about when we were in our 20s, the six-pack abs have
Yeah.
gone
Yeah.
to the wayside, and now it's like, can you open a jar by yourself?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
No, and can you just stand
but
up?
but serious,
Pistol
yeah,
squats and all that sort of stuff. So
absolutely,
I
yeah.
want to ask you
Those are
about because
yeah,
we haven't got into it. And we're running out. We really are running out of time. I'm going to have to cut us off. But um, what we haven't talked about, which is really interesting,
yeah,
that we haven't talked about, is the fact that you must have had tremendous amount of trauma symptoms, tremendous anxiety, tremendous depression. But that's not the story here, is it? Which
no,
is really interesting, I think.
yeah, yeah.
Why is that
I
not the story?
Well, for me, it was really around the choices I'd make.
Right.
I think a key thing
I mean, you obviously
to
had these things, but it's
oh
not,
totally.
you
Oh,
must have
yeah.
had trauma, you must have had depression, you must have
Oh,
had
all
anxiety,
of it. Yeah.
and suicidal ideation, all that sort of stuff. But it's not the story that you experience, right?
No, I do think like through my study, studying like around happiness, and I think, happiness is really driven by discernment, like the choices we make. We
I get
every
that.
day we have choices,
Yeah.
and I could have easily have chosen to sort of go down the rabbit hole of anxiety and depression, and some people do so, and even though they don't want to choose it, it's so overpowering. And so, but for me, I was like, I was trying to tap into these practices that help me stay grounded, that help me have some clarity and some space, as I mentioned,
Right.
to make these choices. And I also was trying to do like small little steps. So like a big part of my recovery, Noel, was small little steps I could do each day that eventually became
Which
part
is
of my day.
the standard theory of success.
Yes.
Break things
And
down
that,
into small
yeah,
steps that you can master, and then you add the next step, then you add the next
yeah,
step.
yeah.
That's
And I
like
was,
that's the success story of life, right?
yeah, and I was trying to play the long game of knowing that, okay, this is going to be a long road trip.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take these small
The
steps. I'm gonna
realism.
try to,
Absolutely.
and then I had faith that,
Yeah.
or belief that if I could string together days of these small steps, I could look back and I could see progress, and that progress then helped shape the narrative I was having. And
Yeah.
so, um, and I was also surrounded. I think this cannot be um, underscored enough. I tried to surround myself with people who were trying to bring out the best of me.
Yeah.
Like,
So
you know,
clever choices.
community. Yeah.
That's
The choices of the
absolutely.
people we hang with are so
Yeah.
important. And
If you want to
um,
become something,
yeah,
surround yourself with people who are already it.
you bet. You
You
bet.
know what
And
I mean?
that
It's
was
like
key.
it's if you think about things like you might have heard of Alcoholics Anonymous, for example.
Yes.
They've got various theories about why they work, which may or may not be correct. But actually, what happens is if you want to be sober and maintain your sobriety, go and hang out with people who've done it already.
Yes. Yes.
It's not
Yeah.
complicated, right? Do you know what I mean?
No, it's not. It's I we here, at least in the States, there's a loneliness epidemic.
Yes.
And
Yeah, there is
I
here. Yeah, absolutely. Particularly
and
amongst guys, and that's another subject we
yes,
can't go into, but I want to come back. We have to finish because I've got
yeah,
to run off,
good. Yes,
because I've got a life.
I know. So do I. Yeah,
Ah,
yes, yeah.
so do you. I know you do. One last thing. I want two sentences from you about what is an intentional life.
An intentional life is one where it's aligned to your first principles and values.
Wow, that's beautiful. I'm going to steal that. I might use that for the marketing, actually, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, use it, use any of it, use it all, use it frequently.
You've got a really nice headshot, by the way. It's really cute.
Oh, thank.
Whoever's doing your marketing is good at their job. Got
Okay.
that slightly mad professor look with your,
Yeah.
which I
Well,
really
it's
like.
like I don't have much hair, but I figure
Well, I might
if
as
it
well make
goes,
it a bouffant.
if it just goes all over the place, it's like
Right.
it gives you the illusion that I have hair.
So look, it's really interesting. As I said to you before the show, I'm always fascinated by people who can transform negative experiences. And I've got some insight into how you've managed to do that. But it seems to me that you've always had that drive in your life
Yes.
from day one, somewhere it came from, was this desire to move, keep moving, move on, learn, grow, develop, broaden yourself. And that seems to me a very good approach to take to life.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah, I definitely have that. So,
Yeah.
and I want to try to use it to help more people. Also, put a good ripple into the world.
Yeah. Good stuff. And it's nice to see a guy in particular during these times, which are not happy for men and men's masculinity and
Yes.
so on. It's nice to see a guy not become angry about this stuff, but to find loving, kind, generative ways, nurturing ways to deal with these things. It's great. It's inspirational stuff, Michael. Really is.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, no, I can appreciate where where we men are at in the tough times. There's a better path than what
Really is.
pathway a lot of men are taking. And I always love trying to help guys follow that path. But it is tough. And so
Yeah.
we try our best.
So, Michael, you say that. Thank you so much for joining me. Real pleasure. Uh,
Yeah,
Folks, I hope you got as much from having a chat with Michael as I did. I got to speak to him a lot more than you, and I'll bring him back because I think there's more to talk about. I'd like to explore issues of masculinity with you, and that in this tumultuous, pretty terrifying world that we're in at the moment.
absolutely. I would love that. I would
Yeah,
love that. And I
great.
again, thanks for having me on, Noel.
You take there. Thanks, folks. Thanks for joining us. Hope you enjoyed that. If you've got any questions, text me or WhatsApp me on 07506 319 745. Don't call me if you're watching the show because it's a pre-record and I'll be out doing something and I'll be a grumpy old man if you call me and interrupt my life. I tell you. So lovely to have you all here and bye bye for now.